Levi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm all right. I'm all right.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for doing this. First and foremost, I just have to say, yeah, thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast. I'm definitely a fan of your work. I've been
Mm.
following your journey since the Brave New Voices days. And
Wow.
yeah, I think I was in middle school around that time, and my literature teacher was putting on that whole series, and then that's when I kind of got glued to your journey as well as some of the other contestants. And
Mm.
I must say, it's like been an absolute inspiration to see your journey and where it's led you to now as an assistant professor of English and creative writing over at Dartmouth College, and author of the Sobbing School,
Mm.
and one of the most accomplished poets of our generation, at least that I would think.
Wow.
Yeah, so Dr. Bennett, I could probably go on all day about listing your accomplishments, but I know you're a busy man, so I just want to get straight into it. I have a lot to pick your mind on. Are you in New Hampshire right now, or are you over in New York?
Yeah, so well, first, thank you for having me on and for that exceedingly generous intro, man. I mean, to me, it's always a miracle when you meet somebody that's had any experience with your art. So to know that it meant something to you means a lot. I'm checking in from Boston, Massachusetts,
Okay.
where I currently live with my fiance and our family dog, Apollo, who's in the next room.
Apollo.
Thankfully, yeah. Apollo 5 is his
What
name.
what made you come up with that name?
So part of why he's Apollo 5 is that he's fifth in the list of meaningful Apollos in my life. So we have sort
Mm.
of Apollo, the Greek god, Apollo Creed. There's the Apollo space shuttle, of course, and then Apollo, the theater in Harlem. So
Wow.
I'm from New York, and the Apollo Theater was a big part of my upbringing. So I figured he would be the fifth Apollo in my life, Apollo 5.
No, that makes sense. That's definitely a lot of thought that went into that name.
Oh, thanks. We
Yes,
tried, man. We try over here.
of course. Yeah. How are things over there in Boston right now for with everything that's going on?
Radically different, in so many different ways. Everyone in my neighborhood is masked, you know, so that's its own thing. Apollo's a Vizsla, so he's a sporting dog, requires a lot of exercise, and even, I mean, this is sort of a small thing, but even as being a dog owner, usually, your dogs will play and you'll speak to people, and you can't really do that anymore. So even when I take them to
Right.
the woods near the house, there's social distancing happening where the dogs have a kind of proximity that's foreclosed for their human companions. So that's
Wow.
been interesting. It's we got to wait online 6 feet apart when you go to the supermarket, all that kind of stuff. It's really radically changed the way I move throughout each day. So I spent most of the day honestly just in the house, which is fine. I mean, I paid for it, so every month I guess I'm investing in trying to make sure I can stay here, but it's surreal. It's
Yeah,
surreal
yeah.
for sure.
I feel that for sure. I feel like I'm definitely enjoying every penny worth of rent that I'm
Yes.
paying right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's finally worthwhile. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
here all day.
So yeah, definitely a lot of adjustments that are being made for me as well. I live over in downtown Los Angeles, and I've never
Wow.
seen anything like this before. It's like apocalypto out of a movie or something like that. But
Yeah.
what are you doing right now to kind of stay creative? I know for me at least, it's hard to be inspired right now,
Yeah.
creatively. So what are you doing to stay inspired creatively?
Yeah. That's reading as much as humanly possible. So I've been just turning to both poets that have always been resources for me, people like Ame Césaire,
Mm,
Evie Shockley, William Matthews, Terrence Hayes, Araceli Scrimme, really going back to that work. In addition to just trying to write a lot of new poems and just trying to get creative. So I'm writing a novel now. I mean, I've just really tried to step outside of the box and work in forms that are unfamiliar to me, just as a way of really keeping my mind sort of sharp in this period.
okay.
Besides that, mostly just checking in with friends. I find that when I have writer's block, what helps me the most is really just to try to get back to living. And so since I can't hang out with anybody, I just try to call friends, talk to them for a couple hours, and then do my best to let that inspire the work.
Nice. Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. I've had a lot of conversations, caught up with old friends, and this is a perfect time to do it. And it's have you felt that it's kind of reignited some old relationships that
For
you
sure.
haven't had a chance to previously?
For sure. There are friends I've had since my early 20s where we've spoken more. I mean, it's kind of surreal actually now that I'm actually having to say it out loud. But we've
Mhm.
spoken more during the quarantine than we did for the entirety of maybe that 8 or 9 or even 10-year period.
Wow.
Right? Like folks, yeah, I mean, especially for my friends that are academics or people that now are working from home in a very different way, especially in those professions where being in the room is really important, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
key to what we do. I've had to check in with those people and share best practices and figure out what does it even mean to teach via Zoom, and
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing something meaningful. What is checking in on students whose parents are struggling, people whose parents are losing their jobs, people who maybe were admitted to graduate programs and those offers got rescinded? What does it mean to sort of be an educator right now? And I think that's helped me check in at least with old friends in the profession, but certainly with family too. I mean,
Yeah.
my family, my father's 70 years old, my mother's around the same age. Checking in with them, one, to make sure they're staying in the house, but
Mhm.
also just because we got a lot more time on our hands where nobody's going to yoga right now outside the house.
Yep.
I'm not on the road. All my spring tour dates got canceled. So it's forcing me to really be still and be a part of my family in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like a blessing in disguise, right? You're able to
Mm,
repair certain aspects of your life and attend to them where you weren't able to previously. So it's awesome that
mhm.
you're making the effort to do those things because I feel like a lot of people may kind of just be taking this time to relax or
Wow.
you know just I don't want to say waste their time, but I just feel like it's great to see that you're being productive with it.
Yeah, I mean, in so many ways too, Levi. I mean, if we're gonna have a conversation, we might as well have an open one. I mean, I
Yeah.
think too, I'm comfortable sharing with you that my grandmother passed within
Oh,
the
I'm so
past
sorry
couple
to hear that.
weeks. Yeah, thank you for that. And so I'm actually also just going through a different phase of life right now. Like realizing that one, I'm part of a larger human community where a lot of us are grieving right now,
Yeah.
where a lot of us, and not all even grieving people, right? Like I'm grieving this woman that was absolutely central to the trajectory of my life. But there are people that are grieving dreams right now, right?
Very true.
People that have lost jobs or lost relationships, or we're right on the cusp of things really turning around, and then everything happened with COVID-19, and their world blew up. So one, it was one of the first times in a long time I realized I'm one person of billions. Many of us on planet Earth are going through this thing right now to
Mhm.
differing degrees and have to figure out how to deal with it. So yeah, in so many ways, it really feels like I didn't really have a choice. Like that happened with my grandmother. Then a couple of my cousins uh, got sick with the virus,
Oh,
and then
wow.
my uncle got sick, and we had to find an aide to take care of him. And then I had these new books coming out, so trying to
Right.
find ways to talk about a book of theory or a book of poems in a pandemic, right? Because you
Yeah.
also, I think, for a lot of us, you're having a crisis of identity, right? Around
Yes.
what, no matter what you
100%.
do. If you're a creative
100%.
person, you're like, okay, but people are losing their jobs, people are dying, people are getting sick and suffering. How does my work speak to that? If it doesn't speak to that specific situation, why does my work matter? And not even just to
Mm.
be able to advertise it or anything, but for yourself. I really had to check in with myself. And a lot of my friends, at least that are artists of good conscience, we had to take a step back and say, wow, well, why does this 200-page book I wrote matter? Well, what is it saying to people? It's made
Right.
us accountable to each other again in a different way. And I do hope that that's part of what we learned from catastrophe, right?
Right.
Especially a catastrophe of this scale. How are we accountable to one another, and how can we better take care of one another? Because what the virus is exacerbating is that a lot of people have fallen through the cracks of our social safety net, especially
Yeah.
here in the United States. Like the specific communities where people are the hardest hit, but also just I think there has to be a real kind of philosophical revolution where we rethink what it means to be a citizenry, and are able to recommit to saying people need better safety nets than what we have right now.
Yeah.
People should be protected.
It is exposing a lot of flaws that are in the system right now. That is definitely
Sure.
true, and that's a really interesting perspective that you just put on it right now. Um, you're kind of finding ways that where you can contribute your art to society. Is that what you're trying to
Mhm.
say?
I'm trying. I gave a reading on Zoom actually. Maybe last week. Yeah, I think last week I had a reading on Zoom. which wasn't even just my poems. So I also just read poems that mean a lot to me, and
Mhm.
from poets I think people should be checking out in this time, which is complicated again. Like this is such a heavy, hard hitting time, and I'm recommending poems to people, but I'm almost not sure what else would be my job right now, right?
Yeah.
So to say,
Yeah.
actually, well, my whole life is built around not just producing literature but teaching it. So I have to believe that if you have the time or space to commit to the literary world right now, you should find ways to read things that feed your soul, feed your heart, feed your mind, and it'll make you a more equipped human being to deal with what's ahead. So I've been trying to contribute that as best I can, trying to do a better job with checking in again just with my students and my
Mhm.
friends and family, because these things aren't minor, right? These are
Right.
people that are having graduations, marriages canceled, people that, not marriages, rather weddings canceled,
Yeah.
people that can't be present for the birth of their children. I mean, all sorts
It's
of
crazy.
life events that people can't attend right now. And I think we have to be attentive to that as well. I know we might be tempted to say, well, get over it. All this other very serious suffering is going on. And I understand that. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that to a 21-year-old who dreamed their whole life of their college graduation, or
Yeah.
someone that's wanted to be a mother or father for their entire life. And now they don't get to share that pivotal moment with someone that they love.
Yeah.
That's another kind of catastrophe.
Definitely. And you empathize with it, I feel like, because you think back to when you graduated, right? And you just
Hmm.
think, what if
For
I
sure.
had that moment missing in my life? And
Right.
I know you gave that graduation speech, right? So can you like
Yeah.
think about if you weren't able to do something like that? And I think it's just crazy because nobody was prepared for this, right? And there's no way you
No.
could have been prepared for it. So it's just a big adjustment period for everyone in the world.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, that's right. I mean, one of my friends and colleagues, we were on the phone the other day, and she was saying she's been so surprised by what she called the buoyancies in the
Mm,
people she knows, right? The way that people were experiencing this catastrophe, like you said, both in some ways unprecedented, right? Though
yeah.
pandemics are, of course, not unprecedented. This scale of pandemic in our interconnected world, right, where we're even seeing the markets react to the speed of the information that's spread, right? That is unprecedented. The way people have been able nonetheless to be resilient in the midst of it, right? People who at the drop of the hat had to say, all right, well, our wedding's canceled, so we're gonna go on a rooftop and we're gonna call a minister or a friend. They're gonna stand 6 feet from us and we're just gonna say our vows, right?
Very
There's not
true.
gonna be a DJ, not gonna be a party, but in the human spirit, we're gonna figure this out. I think that to me has been a cause for optimism, to be
Yeah.
honest, is that people really have somehow dug deep. My grandmother's funeral, I watched it via Zoom, and
Wow.
I helped organize it over the telephone with my big
Wow.
sister and my mother, and we had to create a text chain to ask people to donate. And then in the building itself, there couldn't be more than 10 people spread apart across the chapel at a time. So people also had to rotate out of my grandmother's funeral service. Um, but nonetheless, we had it, right? We honored
Yeah.
her life. And I'm hoping in the summer we could have a much bigger memorial, right? But
Yeah.
even just the speed with which people realized that that was their new reality, and that nonetheless we had to carry through that kind of ceremony, because burying each other is something human beings do.
Yeah.
um, Marriage vows, these kind of ceremonies, they're important to who we are as a species. And so
Yeah.
that has been heartening for me to see that.
It's not like you can just wait to grieve until this is over, right? I
No
mean,
way.
you can't wait for something like that. Since this is kind of heavy on your heart, I kind of wanted you to speak on it. How
Yeah.
much of an impact did your grandmother have on your upbringing?
So much, in so many different ways. So she actually owned, at one point, three different hair salons in Harlem.
Wow.
And I would go to one of her salons after school, and I would get $1 every time I could spell a word that was 3 syllables or longer. So
Mm.
words like recalcitrant, magnanimous, loquacious, right?
How old are you
And
when this
I
was
was
happening?
little. I was 5 or 6. I was a
Wow.
little, yeah, yeah. I was a little kid, and I just remember even then having that experience of seeing people celebrate eloquence, and in a relationship to the study of language, right? The study of the English language, of literature, of vocabulary. So my grandmother was absolutely instrumental in that. She always recited poems from memory, right? And this is long before I'd ever seen spoken word, right? I'd
Right.
never seen a poetry slam or anything like that. But when I was a little kid, we would have Christmas at my grandmother's apartment in the Bronx every year. And she would recite, these old poems like Claude McKay, Langston Hughes, these kind of early 20th century, often Harlem Renaissance poets off the top of her head. She was from Wilmington, North Carolina, and was a sharecropper as a little girl and a teenager. It's where she met my grandfather, whose name was actually Levi. They met.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of incredible. It's a family name, so as soon as I saw your email, I was like, all right, we're gonna do this. Uh, they met in a strawberry field, and came up north together. And so even the fact that I teach African American literature, especially with a focus on the environment, I think
Mhm.
so much of that is coming from that history of people that had this relationship to the land that, of course, was fraught, right? It was circumscribed by extraction and theft. Like the crops my grandmother was picking, she was not getting paid properly, right, for that labor. And somehow, in the midst of that, she still was able to fall in love and develop a relationship to the land that wasn't just traumatic. And that taught me
Right.
something, that no matter the context or environment you grow up in, they really can't kill your imagination,
Do
you
you
know?
think do you think the reason, like, your relationship with your grandma and your relationship to what you just explained, it gives
Mhm.
you a certain spark of passion to teaching about it?
100%. I just believe literature matters, right? I believe
Right.
poetry matters. I think expression is absolutely key. And if I didn't, I would do something else, which I try not
Mm.
to say too much in the classroom, but I really feel that way, man. Like I could have done a lot of things. I could have become a preacher, a lawyer. I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was a little boy.
Wow.
And I love being a professor, but I don't think it's the only thing I'm good at. And it's not the only thing I've ever loved. The reason I made the choice to do this was I believed that having good teachers changed my life. I
Mm.
think I would have been a very different kind of person if specific teachers that I remember by name had not intervened in my life, given me specific books and essays and poems that changed the way I thought about what the world was and who I could be in it. Right.
Wow.
So I'm super passionate about it because I just think it matters. I was a really angry kid. Spoken word gave me this incredible outlet to express myself, to make friends. I also didn't know how to make friends for a lot of my life. Poetry slam just gave me something to talk about with people, and
Okay.
I'm immensely thankful for that.
Yeah, you actually just took my next question out of my mouth. I was gonna ask
Yeah,
you, growing up in an underfunded public school system in Yonkers, New York, it definitely could have been easy for you to go another route, right?
for
But
sure.
yeah, all of those things that you just stated kind of helped you stay focused, right? And stay on
Mm,
path. And you had people in your life that obviously had a huge impact on you, right?
yeah, for sure. 100%. My sixth grade math teacher, Miss Riley,
Shout
in
out Ms. Riley.
particular. Yeah, shout out to her in particular. She signed me up for this summer program called Summer Bridge, which is at Riverdale Country Schools, a private school in Riverdale, New York. And I went to school during the summer when I was 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old, to prepare to take an entrance exam to end up in an independent school for high school, Rye Country Day School, which changed the trajectory of my life. But yeah, I could have gone in a bunch of different ways. It was teachers, it was my family, it was mentors, and also friends who
Yeah.
helped me believe it was okay to be smart. Um, and I don't know that this is a popular opinion necessarily, but even my bullies, like people that were quite cruel to me on the one hand, I think nonetheless, how to say this? I think seeing the pain, because I think even then I had a sense that they were being really mean. Frankly, that was the language I used when I was 11, so it's the language I'll use now. I was like, I think you're being really mean because you're in a lot of pain right now. And I
Wow.
think even that experience really taught me something. I was like, okay, I don't think you're inherently evil. Like, we're all 11 years old. And it's my sense from even the little bit of information I have about you, that you're really hurting right now. And that's part of the way you treat me, the way I see you treat other students, the way I even see you treat teachers. And so that taught me something as a young person growing up in that environment, which was often quite literally violent. I mean, and this is tough because I hear people talk about violence a lot now, rhetorical violence, and of course, like language can be violent. But I think as someone who grew up seeing people get knocked in the head with bottles and jumped and stuff, like there are levels to violence. And
Yeah.
so seeing that as a kid, it taught me that when we talk about violence, we have to be very clear about what most people in the world mean by violence and what they live through.
Yeah.
And it taught me to have real empathy for people and to understand what mercy was.
From an extremely young age as well too. Like that's very mature thinking to have at that young of an age. I'm in my mid 20s now, and I think in my early 20s is when I started to realize that people who do inflict pain on others are the ones that are feeling pain themselves. And that's crazy that you started to realize that when you were at that young of an age. That's pretty next level thinking.
Oh, well, thank you. A lot of that's from family too. You know, my father's a veteran, and was diagnosed with PTSD. And I think even seeing that, right? Like he fought in Vietnam when he was a 17-year-old boy, you know, and
your grandparents can have like a movie written on written about
yeah,
them,
my
so.
grandparents, my parents, like it's my dad in particular is a textbook. Man, my dad integrated his high school. His high school was segregated in Birmingham, Alabama. He was the first Black student to attend and graduate from his high school. Then, because his little brother, my uncle, who's still alive, he's a minister in Richmond, Virginia. Hi, Uncle Stanley. And he wanted to enlist in the Vietnam War, and the recruiter told them that they wanted to take two sons from the same family. So my father enlisted to keep my uncle from having to go, right? And of course, you know, they sent them both, right? But this is as a 17-year-old kid. Do you see what I'm saying? Like he was willing to lay down his life for his brother. And then, of course, as his son, I saw the effects of not just that war, but living through Jim Crow and coming back from Vietnam and not having a culture here in the States that really celebrated many of those men, right? That had made that incredible sacrifice, right? And so I knew from an early age that people that go through intense pain and abuse, they wear it often, right? Now, I think as an adult with his own sort of trauma and traumatic experiences, I know that it's still my responsibility to go to therapy, to exercise, to like do the things I need to do. So I don't, you know, spread that far.
Become one of those people that inflicts the pain on others.
Right. But little kids don't know that, right?
Yeah.
I didn't grow up really in an abusive environment. Like my parents, you know, struggle with various things, but seeing what a lot of my peers went through, I went through nothing like that. My parents told me they loved me. They told me I was smart. I had books, and I didn't have a lot of clothes because we didn't have a lot of money, but people invested in me. I believed that I deserved to live and to flourish. And that's not something that one should take for granted, because not everyone grows up in that kind of environment.
Definitely. So I know that you have 3 disabled siblings, right? How much of an impact did that have on your upbringing? I know that you had a lot of poems dedicated to your siblings. So was that your way of kind of giving them a voice?
Not so much giving them a voice as trying to paint a robust picture of what growing up in that environment taught me about the world, right? Which is that there are many people with disabilities on planet Earth, right? That in many ways, I mean, so I started my graduate research as someone in the field of disability studies, and some of the language they use in that field is that people with disabilities are the largest minority in the United States, for instance, right? And that all of us, if we live long enough, will eventually become disabled, right?
True,
like
very
our
true.
vision will change, hearing will change, your ability to walk will change, right? Like our bodies are dynamic, right? The human brain is dynamic. So my poem about my little brother, Levi, for instance, right?
Right.
That poem took me 10 years to write because he was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum when he was 3 years old. But it took me until, you know, a decade later to write that poem because I wanted to have what felt like the right language to describe the feeling, right? Which was largely not that that I lost something necessarily, right? But the idea that I knew I lived in a world where people would map terrible things on him when they saw him, or wouldn't be patient with him, right? Or would see themselves as being patient with him when he was actually being patient with them. So that experience just taught me a great deal. You know, my older brother's schizophrenia diagnosis, like that became apparent after he was incarcerated as a teenager, right? So also when I was young, I started making those connections between whatever our jail and prison system was and the state of mental health in this country, right? Which,
Right.
if you look at the statistics, those are intimately connected, right? Both
Yes.
people that are diagnosed as having mental health issues and then go into prison, but also people who develop those kind of conditions and have them exacerbated by being incarcerated, right? So again, just like where we began this conversation, you have to think about these things as interconnected. And I think growing up in a family with multiple people with disabilities pushed me, even as a very young person, to think, okay, I can't take certain categories for granted. And we need to be thinking about class, gender, race, disability, all of these things at the same time when we talk about human experience.
Definitely. I can definitely relate to that because I have an uncle who has Down syndrome and we were very close growing up, and it just sucked to see how others would treat him, in public
Yeah.
areas. There would be just people that would make senseless remarks all the time and bully him, and it makes you more gives you more empathy towards people who have disabilities
Mhm.
at a young age, and it takes you throughout the rest of your life, and yeah, I think that does definitely have a huge impact on the person that you are today. And
Mhm.
um yeah, did you so actually, yeah, that transitions well into my next question. Did you
Sure.
ever envision you becoming the man you are today with all that you've accomplished?
No.
Did you always have like a grandmaster plan for yourself?
That's a good question. I did not. I did not always have a grandmaster plan. I promise. When I was in high school, I was just trying to graduate high school.
Right.
I didn't. To be honest, Levi, I didn't even have a lot of the language for the stuff I'm doing now. Like, I didn't know any professors when I
Right.
was a kid. I didn't know what a professor was until I was 17 years old, and someone gave me a copy of the Cornell West book, Race Matters. I read the book, I turned it over, and I saw that he was a professor of African American studies at Princeton, right? All I knew about Princeton at the time was that Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince went there, right? That was all I knew about Princeton, right? I'd never heard of African American studies. And at that moment, I realized that, of course, I knew what college was, right? Like, I was in the process of applying to colleges, but I'd never thought about the process through which one becomes a professor or what professors actually do besides teach on college campuses, right? So I
Right.
figured out, well, clearly they write books, right? That's one thing they do. But this guy, Cornell West, it seemed like had a whole kind of public project. He was giving speeches and lectures and traveling the world and talking to rappers, about their relationship to language. And so part of why I think it was hard for me at the time to imagine some of what I'm doing now is I didn't know anyone that had ever done it. I didn't know anyone that had been a spoken word poet, but also published books and was also a professor. I had no idea what that would look like. And honestly, I'm really thankful for that. I'm thankful that my parents were working class people who both worked for the post office. You know, my father explicitly, when he would drop me at school, say, "I go to this job which I don't like, so you can have options," is what he said. Right,
Wow.
so you can have choices. And I'm really thankful to have parents who allowed me to be something they'd never seen. I think that's got to be really hard. Right? I told
Yeah.
my mother I wanted to be a poet. She looked at me like I'd said I want to grow up and be a dragon. I mean, it was weird fantasy stuff. And then she got to go to the White House, so she thought that was, maybe this is a solid
Maybe
plan.
this.
Once she met Michelle Obama, she was like, all right, I'm gonna ease up on the kid. And so no, I never really had it mapped out, and I'm exceedingly thankful, that a lot of this has come together. I've worked hard, but so much of it is just, for me, grace, the grace of God and the thoughtfulness of everyday people, people that watch my videos. I'm still
Yeah.
shocked by that. People that watch my videos, people that come to shows, people that buy books. I genuinely don't take that for granted. I don't want it to seem performative. It's not like, oh, shucks, you guys like me. It really is mind blowing to me that people take the time to embrace the art of a person they've never met. That will never cease to be incredible to me. I've been performing since I was 4 years old, but in terms of professionally, since I was 19 years old, right? I've been on the
Yeah.
road for over a decade. And every time I have a performance, it blows my mind to see people in the seats.
With that being said, as somebody who used to be fearful of public speaking myself, I
Yeah.
overcame that at a certain point in my life. Um, did you ever feel fearful of public speaking? And if so, how did you overcome that fear to become the maestro of public speaking that you are today.
Oh, wow. Levi, we need you to do a blurb on one of my books. This is great. You're
I
giving
got
me
you.
you're giving me great quotables today.
I got
I'm
you.
still afraid of public speaking.
Really?
Yeah, even when I talk to high school students, I tell them that all the time. Before I give a lecture in class, before I perform, before I give a speech, I still feel and it's not just butterflies, they're bigger than that. They're mockingbirds or something. I mean, I
Wow.
really go through it every time I perform. But when I'm in the moment of performance, I feel free, right? Which I think is just part of how it goes, that the nervousness is because I care a lot about what I'm saying. And I know that seeing really good, meaningful, honest performances changed my life. So I know that every time I get on stage, that possibility is there. Not because I'm so great, just because performance can do that to people.
Yeah,
You see a
definitely.
really beautiful opera, you hear an amazing guitar riff, that has the opportunity to make something in your brain click, and you're a
Mhm.
different person after that. So I think I overcame it just by doing it, right? I don't even know so much that I overcame it as I overcome it, if that makes sense. That every time I go in front of a microphone, I'm overcoming it. I'm working through it. And I think that's how,
You build
at least
confidence, right?
for sure. I mean, I'm confident in it. So maybe I should establish that. I'm very confident in myself as a public speaker, but I still feel that fear because you never know what's going to happen,
Very
right?
true.
You could kill it. And I've seen this happen. You can kill a set, right? Whether this is singing, poetry, any other form of music, and people just might not be into it.
Is that
Like you could
because
have oh, go ahead.
is that because it's subjective as to where the audience, can it's their opinion on whether or not you did well, and all you can do is what you can do, right? All you control is what you can control.
For sure. Which is why, to me, and this is just advice I give to any people that especially want to become spoken word poets, if you can't recite a poem while you're doing everyday activities, so for me, that's making breakfast and when I'm in the shower. Those are my two tests for if something's memorized or not. Like if I
Okay.
can't make breakfast and spit a poem, it's not memorized. It's not off book yet. So I'm confident in
Interesting.
myself as a performer. But even if you've got it memorized, even if you've run the poem by people, your friends have edited it, there's no guarantee that it hits. Also, there are poems that hit in certain rooms and don't hit in others, right?
Very true.
There are poems I could do at an academic conference that might kill, and I'll perform it in a poetry slam, right? And people might say, And the reverse is true. There are poems that will light up a poetry slam that you bring them into maybe an academic venue or you perform it for young people, right? So at this
Very true.
juncture in my career, quite often I'm actually reciting work for middle schoolers and high schoolers. And that's been a major change because in my early career, it was all college shows. I didn't have any gigs for middle schoolers. How would a middle school teacher know who I was, right?
Yeah.
During those college years, the YouTube videos that I put out were eventually, and I was incredibly thankful for this. They were taught to much younger children. And
Wow.
then that's been really the past 5 years, pretty consistently. Elementary schools, middle schools, high schools will bring me in to teach poetry to kids. And so you have to learn to be dynamic and diverse with your material. And that's helped me too grow as a public speaker, is to say I have a bunch of different directions I can take it. If I see one thing isn't working, the academic stuff sort of isn't working, I have other muscles, right, that I can use. And I think anyone who's a performer, you have to develop those.
Yeah, definitely. I can firsthand say that's true because your poems were taught in my middle school by my teachers. So,
Right, right,
and
right.
it's crazy that you don't even know where your poems are being led to. Your
No
poems are
way.
probably being taught at like places that you have no idea about, which is
Yeah,
pretty
no,
crazy to
that's
think about.
real. No, it's incredible. One of my friends, he sent me a Facebook message. I wanted to get the platform right because it wasn't a text. He sent me a Facebook message of his classroom in the Philippines where he was playing
Wow.
my video, and it boggled my mind. I mean, when I had a manager still, my older sister, she would show me the metrics from our Facebook pages, right? So I
Mm.
was a part of I started an organization with her called the Strivers Row back in
Yes, we're definitely aware of
2011.
that.
Yeah, so she ran our metrics through Facebook, and I was seeing we had people watching our poems in South Africa, Iran, Great Britain,
Man.
Australia. I mean, all across the world. And I never fathomed that, that people even outside a room I might be performing in live would hear the poems, much less people on other continents. But that's
Yeah.
the reach, both of the internet, but the reach of art in almost any era. You know, some
Yeah.
stuff takes off and travels and you can't predict it.
That's got to be super humbling to see those type of numbers and see those type of places where people are viewing your videos.
For
That's crazy.
sure.
What are you, would you have a certain process that you go through mentally before you do a public performance? Is there a certain like routine that you have that you can recommend to other people that might be scared of public speaking?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I hope this isn't too repetitive, but I just run the poem again 1 or 2
Okay.
times that morning. I might even run through, I want to be honest here. I don't think I run through entire sets anymore. I would recommend that if you're starting off, um,
Okay.
to know, have at least a general sense, if you're a poet, so this is specifically for poets, have a sense of the order, right? That might change. And I would say, have a sense of the order so you can be open to change, right?
Mm,
I still do this every time I get up for a reading or performance. I have a general sense of the itinerary, like what poems I'm going to read and in what sequence. But if I'm seeing a particular type of poem isn't working, this is just the entertainer in me, I'm going to switch out of that and try something else because it's just not as fun for me if it's not working, you
yeah.
know?
Just thinking on
And
your feet, kind of, right?
you have to. I think any good performer, and I learned this maybe both from preachers and from jazz people, right? And from actors, you know, from the theater, you have to be able to improvise if you're gonna be
Mm.
great, I think. Or I mean, who knows what I know about greatness, but I think you have to be able to improvise for sure because it'll open pockets in your work that you couldn't have imagined beforehand. I can't tell you the times that I've maybe forgotten a line in something, put in something new, and it just opened a different window in the poem. And then that'll become the line instead of the thing I forgot,
Wow.
right? Or I'll just feel really maybe brash one day and I'll swap out part of a poem and I'll do something else just to see if it lands, you know, and how it lands. And that kind of experimentation is opened up by practicing a lot. So that's what I would say. Practice, practice, practice. Have people that love you enough to tell you when something isn't working, which isn't
Very
the same
important.
as it's not good, right? I think people understandably are scared for people they care about or whose opinion they care about to tell them work isn't good. There's a distinction between something being good enough and something that's just not working for a particular poem, right? I've had
Yeah.
whole sections of work where really that just wasn't the beginning of that poem. It's the beginning of a poem, just not that one, right? Like that's not serving that particular piece. And that's been really helpful for me too. So those are the two things I would say. Practice a ton and create a community of listeners and editors, no matter what you do. If you make music, you sing, you dance, you need people to bounce ideas off of if you're going to craft something you're putting online or putting in front of audiences on the regular.
Yes, 100%. I think we all have those friends that will tell you anything that you're doing is good. Kind of like how your mom is. She's just like,
Yeah,
son, like it's amazing no matter what you do, right? But
yeah.
I mean, it's important to have those people around you that are going to give you constructive criticism and taking
Hmm.
that and actually not getting hurt by it, but implementing it into your work. And yeah, I agree 100% with you on that.
Yeah.
Um, so you've performed at some pretty amazing venues, events for
Mm.
some pretty amazing people. I know you meant one of them that you mentioned earlier was at the White House for the White House
Mhm.
Poetry Slam, right? Or
Mhm.
Jam for President Obama. Talk about that experience and where does that rank on
Ooh,
your best
okay.
performances or top performances?
Oh, that's a great question. Sheesh. Okay, so I'll talk about the experience first, then we'll go into the power rankings. So yeah, it was, I mean, life altering, you know. I was a junior in college. It was spring, I believe. No, no, no. I was a no, I was a junior. I was a
Okay.
junior in college because I lived in Du Bois College House at Penn. I remember where I was because I was studying for finals. And I got a phone call asking if I wanted to perform at the White House. And one, I said, of course, right? Then
Of
I
course, yeah.
literally did laps around my dorm. Like I ran down the stairs, was so hype. I did laps around the dorm.
Just to
And
get
then
the
the game,
excitement out.
I'm from New York. So, and
Oh,
I don't know. It might be like a cultural thing too. I just ran. I was like, woo, you know, I was so, because it's unbelievable. Like,
yeah.
again, so much of this, I think, is just being from Yonkers, not growing up with money or really access. And the idea that I was going to go perform one of my poems for, again, also the first Black president, right? There was sort
Yes.
of like, and I just voted for it, right? It was the first time I'd ever voted. I voted for Barack Obama. And the idea that now I was being invited to perform at the White House was incredible to me. So I was just so excited I had to run around a little bit. But then they gave me the specifics. They said, okay, we need a 2-minute poem on the theme of communication, right? And so then it got a bit more stressful. So I was saying, okay, how much time do I have? And I really only had, I think, about maybe a week and a half or so. It might have even been less than that. It wasn't 2 weeks. I think it was less than 2 weeks
And
that I
you were in
had
finals
between.
too, right?
Come on. So I'm not, all right, I have schoolwork, and you're telling me I have to either compose something completely new or edit an existing poem down to 2 minutes and then have it in performance shape, not just for the stage, but for the White House, right? So that was super hectic, but some aspects of it were easy. So they asked me who my plus one was. It was my mom, just no doubt. So I get on, they pay for my Amtrak to DC, and I'm standing at the front of the White House with the other poets from that evening, Milo Del Valle, Jamaica Osorio, who now I think is a political scientist at the University of Hawaii, Esperanza Spalding, Lin-Manuel Miranda, James Earl Jones, Michael
Jeez.
Chabon. It was this wild moment where we were all together because we had to go through a Secret Service, security clearance. And we had a run through, like we had a mic check basically, a sound check rather, where we, tested the microphones and everybody ran through their thing. And so I performed it for that small group. That was the only rehearsal I had though. I performed the poem once for that group and got really great feedback from everyone. Everyone was very generous. And then me, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and James Earl Jones, we had like a freestyle cipher in the back of the White House. We
Wow.
got James on camera saying, "Luke, I am your father." There's some old, you can ask Lynn about this. He has some
Okay.
old like phone footage of it. It was incredible. And then I performed, my mom was right there next to Joe Biden and, the Obamas. And it was incredible. I've never had an experience quite like it. I had never had an experience like it before, and never really won exactly like it since. I mean, I was invited by the Clinton Global Citizen Awards to perform, and so I got to I introduced Bill and did some poems there. But there was nothing quite like that. Like the intimacy of the space, the fact that Spike Lee was there, Saul Williams was there, James Earl Jones did Othello, right? And
Just a
Lynn
lot
did the
of
first.
greatness going on in that
It was
building.
ridiculous. Lynn did the first public performance of what would eventually become Hamilton. He
Wow.
did the first number from Hamilton. You can see it on YouTube. That
Okay,
night
I'm
he
gonna
did
look it
the
up.
first number. It's incredible. And so, yeah, that was transformative. And after that was really, I would say, when my career, I was 19, and that was when my career as a professional poet really started. Because after that was when I started charging to do shows and things like this. Because at that point I'd done the NAACP Image Awards, I did the White House, and then it was like, okay, maybe I should really think about this as a job and a way to gain, financial independence. So
Yeah.
that was great.
And
Now,
to
where
have
does
that
it
on your
go?
resume too, just
Yeah,
that's like top notch to have something on your
yeah,
resume like that.
it changed everything. Yeah, because I applied for fellowships and things like that, and it, it made a huge difference. So that was huge. I mean, I feel like that probably has to be number one, but 2 through 5 or so, I mean, we're pretty great. So, I mean, the NAACP Image Awards in no small part because I got to see Beyonce soundcheck before we went up. This is 2009 NAACP Image
Oh my
Awards.
god.
Saw Halle Berry backstage, Diddy in the green room. It was just an incredible night. Like that was ridiculous. And got to do sort of a group poem with my friend Ben Swag and George Watsky. So that was pretty great. I had a show at Colorado College that I think had, no lie, 1,500 people at it. And
Wow.
there's something kind of surreal about doing a poetry set, and there's over 1,000 people.
Does
It
it
was nuts. It was
sorry
wild.
sorry to interrupt you. Does that take away the intimacy of it or
Not for me. I was hyped. I was like, this is amazing.
yeah.
There is something about a small crowd though that's special. But I think especially then the way I did the shows was there was a level of showmanship to it where I feel like having the big crowd didn't subtract from it. Like our
Okay.
biggest Strivers Row crowd was around that number. And we had a show at Stage 48, which is, a concert venue. And we packed it out. Over 1,000 people,
Mm.
tickets sold. We had signings and everything like that, autographs and photos after. And I think doing shows at that scale is actually important for the genre, I think, to be completely honest. Like I know places like Button Poetry like do stuff like that now. And I think there's something to it. Like the idea that you can put on a spoken word concert. I think hundreds to more than 1,000 people will come out for that kind of stuff. And it becomes a way to elevate uh, not necessarily the art form as such, but it elevates what we can expect from the art form, right?
Right.
What kind of poem do you have to perform to hit 1,000 people in a
That's very
room?
true.
And what does it mean to train yourself up to be able to do that? I'm really thankful that I had to hone that skill, in my 20s. I think it made a big difference.
That's something that a lot of people don't think about, I think, from the outside looking in. So
Yeah,
that's interesting that you have that perspective on it. Transitioning a bit into your writing,
yeah,
how long did you work on your debut book, The Sobbing School?
yeah, it's a great question. So the oldest poem in the Sobbing School is from 2012.
Okay.
And I think the poem I sent it off in 2015. So the last poems in that book, the most recent poems in that book were written right before I sent it off in 2015. So really it was completely composed between 2012 and 2015, that book. So
Okay.
about 3 years. And then it came out in 2016. So
Okay. What experiences did you kind of take from that and apply
mm,
to your writing that you're doing right now for being property of oneself, right? That's your
yeah,
or
being property
myself.
once myself. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I mean, but the thing is, so this is interesting. So being property once myself started as my dissertation. So I
Okay.
actually wrote most of that book at the same time as the Sobbing School.
Mm.
So it's interesting to me, and that book also started in 2012, really, when I was in a graduate seminar on minstrelsy, actually, and we read this book by Charles Chestnut called The Conjure Woman, and there were all these stories in it where Black people were being transformed into animals, into golems, into trees, and I
Wow.
just kept thinking, what is this weird relationship to the environment that we're seeing expressed in these works, and can you find it elsewhere? And the answer was yes. And that's the argument of the book, really, is that what I'm calling the Black environmental imagination is something we can just trace throughout the history of African American literature. And so I started writing that dissertation as a graduate student at Princeton at the exact same time that I was writing the Sobbing School. And so now, with my second book of poetry coming out, that'll be out in September. That was a book that came out of the writing practices I learned from writing those first two books, right? Where I had to every day, try to get something on the page. Then when you have a wealth of material, you can cut it down, right? I
Right.
think this most recent book is maybe 39 poems, 36 or 39 poems. And you get it down to the stuff that works best together, right? You're trying to really capture a window in your life. So that really helped liberate me, I think. This idea that you don't have to get down every good idea you ever had. You really just want to do your best to capture the beauty of a specific moment in your life, because hopefully there'll be other books, right? You'll
Right.
have other poems. And if you're writing a dad poem, for instance, right? Like that's not the last poem you're going to write about your dad. So for Brave New
Very
Voices,
true.
for example, I had that poem Carbon Copy about my father, right?
Hmm.
And one of the central poems in this new book is a poem called America Will Be, which was in Best American Poetry this year, which also kind of blew my mind. But that's another poem about my dad. It's very different from Carbon Copy in some ways, but it's also, sort of similar themes, right? Across the expanse of history, how can I relate to my father? We're so different in so many ways. I went to private school and I'm a professor, and like he integrated his high school and fought a war and worked, a blue collar job for 40 years, lifting bags of mail, for 10 hours a day, running a Bible study, being a
Jeez.
deacon at a church, very different sort of orientation to the world. Um, and my career as a poet in many ways can also be mapped through trying to figure out that relationship between me and my father and all of the various human beings in the world that are also trying to navigate that distance, right? How do we get closer to the people we love, right? And how do we
Yeah.
maintain whatever closeness we have already?
Yeah. I noticed he's on the cover, right?
Yeah, Wow, you did
That's
your
pretty amazing.
homework, for real.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
telling you, man, I'm a fan. Your work is
This man was
amazing, and I.
on it. This man was on it. Yeah, that's me and him. 1992.
What made you choose that specific picture?
All right, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is an exclusive. No other outlet has this.
Okay.
So I sent Penguin maybe 7 options for the cover, and they loved that one. Like
Wow.
I like that photo a lot, but I was open to other options, and they said no, 100%. This is the one, and it was the only image I sent them that was of me. Like the rest of them weren't family photos, right? Like they were these
Right.
sort of classical historical images for the most part, or else contemporary photos that I just found interesting. But that photo stuck out to me because of the intimacy. It's like the way my father's holding me. It's the way he's sort of looking at me. It's the way I'm looking right into the camera, right? And
Yeah.
eating. What am I even eating in that? Like cornbread, collard greens. I mean, I'm looking at it, I'm like, why is a 4-year-old eating this like huge plate of food that I was? And yeah, a lot of the book is about my relationship to him, but also because that title ode is it's a play on words, so it's a play on ode, ode, right? The form of poem. You know, it's often a celebration, but it's also about what's owed to my father and people like him, right? It's about the legacy of reparations in this country, but it's also about reparation as a concept. How do
Okay.
we repair our relationships to each other, right? For people we've lost touch with, people we've fallen out with, things about ourselves that we were raised to be ashamed of. How do you repair that, right?
Yeah.
Becoming an adult, at least as far as I can tell, is in large part about repairing things that other people broke for you, right? Over
Yes.
the course of your growing up. You still have
Yes.
to be responsible for it. You're going to get to the end of your life and it's your responsibility. And this is sad, right? That's pretty tragic actually. That so much of our adulthood is just repairing things that people destroyed in us and for us. But nonetheless, I think that's the difficulty of being, right? So the
Very
book
well
is really
said.
about that. Yeah, the book is about that striving.
Yeah, and it's important to come to realization of that. I feel like because it's easy to put that blame on somebody else
Yeah,
rather than confronting it and overcoming. I feel like if you're constantly putting that blame on somebody else, you're never truly becoming who you can be, right? You're never really reaching your potential. So I think
yeah.
that's awesome. That cover looks like a Kendrick Lamar album cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's high praise, man. I love the Kendrick. Kendrick hasn't missed, I don't think, with a cover. Like I think the
Mm-mm.
Damn cover is okay, but the rest of those covers are amazing. And I actually don't mind if the Damn cover is just okay because Duckworth. I mean that
Duckworth,
closing
yeah.
an album. I love that song. That's one of
It
my
is. It's
favorite
a
Kendrick
hitter.
songs. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I know the book was slated to come out this year.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
September.
still is so it's gonna come out in September?
Yeah,
Okay.
September 1st. September
September 1st.
1st for Ode. Being Property Once Myself actually comes out next month. Less than a month from now, May
Ooh,
12th. That
okay.
book will be dropping, so be on the lookout.
That's good to hear that everything that's going on isn't really affecting the drop date or
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. I mean, we're hoping too, you know, that because right now Penguin is just sort of doing the digital thing, but print copies will be available in September. That's
Okay.
the that's the thinking.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm gonna cop a
Thank you.
copy myself.
Oh, thank you.
Definitely. Uh does writing exhaust you or energize you?
Energizes me
Energizes you. Okay.
for sure. Sometimes it can feel like a weight lifted depending on what I'm writing and how. Um, but it always energizes me, you know, to give language to the air. It's a
Okay.
beautiful thing.
Do you have a writing kryptonite at all?
Ooh, I don't think so. I hope to never discover it. You know,
Mm,
I don't want to know
great answer.
what force could stand in front of me in the page. That'd be devastating.
Do you think somebody could be a writer without feeling emotion?
No. I mean, well, maybe. You could write something. I don't know how good the writing would be. Um, I've been thinking a lot about this Alfred North Whitehead essay called The Aims of Education. And it opens, I don't want to butcher it, but I think it's he talks about culture basically being activity of thought is one phrase he uses, but also he says receptiveness to beauty and humane feeling,
Okay.
right? That's what culture is. And that's the purpose of education, right? is to teach us to be receptive to beauty and humane feeling, right? So to me, the best writing has to come from a place of some sort of emotional openness, right? And I'm saying this as an academic too. I think the best academic writing for me bears the trace of the work meaning something to the person composing it, right? I think the more
Right.
emotionally vulnerable we are, it opens us to new ways of thinking and thus new ways of writing.
Okay. Very well said. I agree. So we're ending the near of our conversation, but I wanted to get into one last segment. It's going to be a
Sure.
rapid fire segment.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm going to ask you 5 random questions, and I want you to do your best to answer them in a 15 to 30 second time span for each question. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So first one is, what are your morning rituals? What does the
Mm.
first 60 minutes of your day look like?
Wow. Oatmeal recently.
Oatmeal.
Didn't used to be. Used to be egg scramble and usually sort of salmon, or I would make arepa from scratch. Now it's oatmeal. Morning ritual. Get up, make breakfast, talk to my fiance, of course, take Apollo outside, walk him, feed him, water, and stack my books for the day. Whatever I'm reading for the day, set it aside, and that's the ritual.
I love it.
Yeah.
Next question. Do you have a quote that you live by or think of often?
Ooh. Uh, yeah. I mean, it's strange that this is the one that's coming to mind, but probably James Baldwin's when he's asked about pessimism, and he says that he can't be a pessimist because who will tell the children there is no hope? Uh, I think I live by that.
You live by that. Okay, great. I know
Yeah.
that. I know there's. In one of your poems, your mother. You said one of your mother's poems also resonates with you. That correct me if I'm wrong. It's you said
Hmm.
if you people treat you based off how you allow them to treat you, right? I
Based on
thought
what you accept from them.
based on what you
Yeah,
accept
yeah.
from them.
My
There
mom
you
wrote
go.
that on our refrigerator when I was little. Yeah, people treat you based on what you accept from them. Yeah,
I
that hit
love
me.
that one. I love that. That one hit hard, definitely for me.
Yeah, yeah, she has bars. Yeah.
She does have bars. How has failure or apparent failure set your life up for later success, or do you
Ooh.
have a favorite failure of yours?
Man, those are two such good and different questions. Uh, I know what it's like to fall and to really be heartbroken and disappointed, which is useful. Like I think once you've hit your bottom in life, that sets a point for comparison that's useful, right?
Okay.
So even when you feel pain later, you remember, and your body kind of physically remembers, right? Certain kinds of heartbreak. And so I've never said this before. I'm glad that I got my heart broken and was devastated at various points in my life. When I was a kid, in my 20s, when I was in college,
Mm.
feeling that helped me have a proper scale, I think, at least for myself. What's my favorite failure? Getting a D on my first essay in high school, because I'd never gotten that kind of grade on my writing before. And it helped me realize I was, one, going to be held to a different standard from that point on. And it taught me not to be too cocky, and that there was a difference between confidence and cockiness. Right?
Okay. A humbling experience or humbling failure
100%. And I thought they were going to throw me out of school. I was on a scholarship. And
for that
so
D.
yeah, dude, I was on a scholarship, an academic
Okay.
scholarship in high school, and the first letter grade I ever got on an assignment was a D in
Oh
world
God.
civilizations. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen a grade like that in my
Oh
life. I
man.
was 14 years old, and it changed everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question. What is the most worthwhile investment that you've made? It could be an investment of money, time, energy, or another resource.
Mm, most worthwhile investment I've made. Oh, it's in love.
And love.
You know,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I think in particular with my older sister, like the time that I've invested over the course of my life in collaborating with her, listening to her, learning from her. My sister also taught me how to read, write, walk, and talk. That's important. Then she became my manager and built the Strivers Row. And watching her become a parent and be a married person, I think has very much prepared me for the other major love investment I made, which is in my fiance. which I think every day just forces me to be a less selfish person, to be more careful with my language, and to realize that my life is fundamentally like not about me in
Okay.
ways that are important.
That was
Yeah.
actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to spin off and ask another question because I forgot to ask this earlier.
Yeah.
How have your priorities changed from your early 20s to where you're at now?
Whew. Completely. 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 Uh, so much now for me is about laying the foundation to have a family, one. So to have a legacy in different ways. I only thought about my legacy as a writer in my 20s. My entire life was about being the most gifted writer possible. It was also about creating opportunities for other writers. I've always tried to take that very seriously. That I wanted, with whether it was with the Starvis Row or various kinds of academic projects I was working on, I wanted to create space for young writers and writers from historically marginalized communities to express themselves. That was always important for me. That's still a priority, but I think having done that in my 20s, I realize now that I have to make space uh, just for my personal life in different ways. Like I have to invest in that. I have to go to therapy. I have to exercise. I have to have regimens to be alive for a long time. Because my hope is that there will be, small people depending on me. I'm marrying someone and
Mm-hmm.
I have a responsibility to her to be my best self and to be well,
Yeah.
both in body and in mind. So that's a complete priority shift from when I was in my 20s and I just wanted to be fly.
Just the fact that you're like living for somebody else at this point now.
For sure.
Okay.
And for my goddaughters and for my nieces and nephews and my students, I mean, it's a complete sort of 180. It's a real shift.
Okay. When you think of the word successful,
Mm.
who's the first person that comes to mind and why?
Huh. It was two people, which is interesting. Um, it was my mother and my grandma. And it's because I think I think my grandmother did what she set out to do. And I think my mother is doing what she set out to do. And there are also things I heard my mother say she was going to do when I was young that she has since accomplished. And I think that's probably one of the greatest barometers for success. Can you
Mm.
measure the distance, one, from where you started to where you ended up, right? And are you happy with that distance? Even if it wasn't some amazing sort of upward trajectory, right? Are you happy with it, right? Is one. And two, did you follow through on your dreams? Which doesn't mean you got them all, but did you attempt them? My mother
Mm.
strikes me as someone that in various ways was willing to say, um, I'm not going to compromise on particular dreams. And she did not compromise on the dreams of her children either, which I think is miraculous and is something that I truly admire. Because it's hard enough to live for yourself, to live for
Yeah.
someone else, and to dedicate your every day to feeding me, dressing me, bathing. I mean, I'm just starting to think about the rhythm of that, right? Even just having a puppy, I had to wake up super early. I had to feed him all the time. I had to train him not to pee in the house. I mean, all this, I was like, man, I have to think about you every day. I can't
Yeah.
gig anymore unless someone's here to take care of you. I have to vet the people that take care. And this is like my companion animal. So yeah, my mom and my grandmother alike, they had good, full dreams, and they achieved them. And even the ones they couldn't grasp, they gave it their all. And to me, that's success.
Yes, that definitely very admirable. When are you gonna run for president, Dr. Bennett? We need
I'm
you right now.
I'm all right. That seems, man. I saw what happened to Bernie, man. I'm all right. I feel like some of the stuff he wants. It's like, yeah, people should have free, college. I don't know. I'm all right. I may do office one day. I don't know. I've been thinking about local office maybe eventually, but for right
Yeah.
now, I'm just really happy. I just want to, be a good husband, professor, writer, thinker. And I'm honored though. If I have your vote, I'll consider it. We'll go back to the drawing board.
Okay, fair enough. Your priorities can always change, but I think you're great at everything that you just said right now. So you're on the right path for sure, at least
That means a
in my
lot, man.
opinion. Definitely. Well, Dr. Bennett, this concludes the podcast. I appreciate you coming on. But before I
Woo!
end this, I want to roll the red carpet out for you. Can you let the people know what you have going on and what they
Sure.
can look forward to from you?
Yeah, sure. So I got two books coming out. One is Being Property Once Myself with Harvard University Press. That's dropping May 12th. And then I have a new book of poems, Ode, which will be out from Penguin Books September 1st, 2020. And yeah, just be on the lookout for both. You can check out my website, www.drjoshuabennett.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sir Josh Bennett. And just be on the lookout. There's a lot of good stuff in the works.
Definitely. I'm excited for all of it. Dr. Bennett, thank you once again. Stay safe out there, and we'll look forward to your next book.
Thank you, brother. Same.
No problem.
This is one of the best interviews of all time, man. Well done.